Lots to unpack with this gentleman, Michael Graham, creative director for the Weekly Standard and Washington Examiner, joining me now from Washington. And Michael, again, Rex Tillerson, a man described, who has described his own relationship with Vladimir Putin as close. So what, against the greater context here, strikes you about the pick?
Well, no one has a photo of them together riding horses shirtless. So let's just set that aside.
It's probably a good thing, right? I mean, we can agree there, right? That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I probably. Yeah. I don't know. Vladimir can pull it off. Look, on the one hand, Donald Trump clearly has a Russia problem, politically speaking, domestically. I don't know about internationally. We saw how well the Russian reset worked with Hillary Clinton. It didn't. And so maybe it is the case that, you get more, flies with honey than vinegar kind of thing. Maybe it's a case that Trump has a grander strategy. I don't know. I just know that picking Rex Tillerson highlights the Russia problem that he already has. At the same time, that's wildly unfair to Rex Tillerson. Like most people who've been involved in conservative politics, I know nothing about this guy. He's never been out on any issues, for us. We haven't seen him in any fights. He's never given a speech at the Republican National Convention. But what I do know is that he has vast connections with governments all over the planet. It's not the case that Exxon is a Russia-centric
But they're business connections, Michael. They're business connections for a for-profit venture. These are not connections on behalf of the American people, nor do they speak to any foreign policy experience whatsoever.
And as far as I know, we don't know that he has a foreign policy. We don't know what exists. But I guess the Trump argument would be, number one, politics has failed. Government bureaucrats have failed. What do you want? More of the fiasco we've had now, Syria, Ukraine, Crimea. On the other hand, this guy, if you think that energy is a key part of global political strategy, and everybody in every conflict from the Palestinian conflict to Asia agrees that it is, this guy knows all the players in the hottest hotspots in the world, from Venezuela to Vladimir Putin. Now, once again, that doesn't say what's his experience handling them or what is his ideological worldview, which side is he on? Is he neocon, anti-neocon? I do know that Bob Gates and Condoleezza Rice are pretty widely regarded. They're pretty center politically, and they both speak very well and recommended Mr. Tillerson.
But they did so having been on the Exxon payroll.
Well, Exxon has a big payroll because, once again, they deal in all these hotspots. I want to be perfectly clear. I'm not prejudging Mr. Tillerson at all. I'm not for or against. I'm wide open. I want to hear more. But I think it is strange to focus solely on the Russia issue when, how about the Saudi Arabia issue? They've got lots of oil. How about Mexico? How about the fact that he was on the ground, I believe it was in Yemen, early on in his career? So if you believe that energy and geopolitical conflict run very closely together, that's the upside. The downside, as you pointed out, is no government experience, and we're not really sure what approach he's going to take.
But that's also not the only reason that we're focusing on Russia. We're doing that because this nomination has been made alongside repeated allegations of Russian meddling in the election, allegations which the president-elect and his team have all but completely rejected out of hand. So if nothing else, what context does that lend this pick? And what have you made of their response to that situation?
Well, once again, as I started off, Donald Trump has a Russia problem, partially of his own make. I mean, let's face it, the guy practically swoons every time he sees, Putin on TV. So Trump has an issue. But also, there's some conflating going on here. No one is suggesting that the Russians hacked the election. That is, the ballot boxes, the voting results, et cetera. What they're saying is that selective leaking was done through WikiLeaks that was motivated by Russia and whatever its grand vision is. Russia has a long-standing tradition of trying to influence politics in other people's countries and here in the United States, going back to the Roosevelt administration and Alger Hiss. So I don't doubt that they want to play hard. I would like to see the American government play hard back. But the notion that they broke our election system, I think, is a bit overblown.
But does this, you'd like to see them play hard back?
Right.
Well, that does not suggest then that a Rex Tillerson pick is playing hard. It seems to be the opposite of whatever that would be.
Well, if we knew what Rex Tillerson's worldview is, I would be able to make more of a judgment today. Look, obviously Tillerson knows how things really work in Russia. He knows where the pressure points are. He knows how they desperately rely on commodities like energy because they have virtually no other economy. So the question is he going to put that work, that knowledge, that ability, that skill to work for the people of the United States, or is he going to have divided loyalties? And I hope that we will get a clear picture of that in the Senate hearings.
Moving on, or from Tillerson, or at least just beyond it, obviously this is dominating the headlines, including those of a particular publication, the Washington Examiner. Perhaps you've heard of it. But Mr. Trump, not just Rex Tillerson, has also added to his administration, just in the last day or so, Rick Perry, former Goldman Sachs executive, soon to be former Gary Cohn, about draining the swamp, about that.
Well, New York City has a nice swamp. Maybe we'll just kind of switch swamps over. I mean this. People think I'm kidding. I mean this. I think Donald Trump is making a mistake by moving into the White House. I think he should stay in New York, do business in New York, and tell the world the private economy and the culture of the West is far more important to me than the politics and bureaucratic hacks down in D.C. I will say that it is ironic, at a minimum, to have friends of Hillary Clinton complaining about Goldman Sachs people being in the Trump administration.
But what if they're simply, pointing out that.
Right.
And we've seen Donald Trump do this as well. He did it yesterday in a tweet saying, hey, if I had lost and I claimed the Russia CIA card, we would be saying conspiracy theory. Sure. A lot of people are simply saying this is exactly what you ran against. Mm-hmm. You rode a populist anti-trade wave. We should point out Rex Tillerson, big supporter of the TPP.
But Wilbur Ross at the Commerce, anti. And if you want to make the swamp creatures very, very nervous, you send in the Attorney General from Oklahoma, who's a constitutional lawyer and knows how to fight the EPA better than anybody. You send in an anti-national teachers union bureaucrat. You send in Betsy DeVos. Yeah. He's got the swamp is not happy. I will say that. I mean, one end of the swamp getting a little better treatment than the other, particularly on the fiscal and financial side, but lots of reasons for the D.C. establishment to be unhappy with the picks that Trump has made. I
mean, just when you see Governor Perry, again, there's just somebody else running another agency which they had hoped would be eliminated prior to being appointed to run it.
Exactly.
And so, you also mentioned the hottest of hotspots. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, Rex Tillerson on record, again, as the head of a for-profit venture, as saying that climate change is a real thing. It is something that is a national security issue. Are there tea leaves to read here?
Well, once again, Donald Trump has brought in a guy who's worked very, very hard to fight EPA overreach, in his opinion, the Attorney General from Oklahoma. And then you've got Rex Tillerson, and Exxon has a mixed record on this, accused on one hand of hiding scientific information, and then on the other hand, accused of getting on board the big government climate change express. So I think we can say there's not a lot of ideological clarity from Team Trump at this point, but that also means opportunity. I also want to say this. One of the reasons Trump was elected is because of a business person can fix it mentality, just broadly speaking. And I think it's fair to say that the people in governmental power have not done a good job of getting the rewards of growth in the economy spread out to everyone. From 2008, who has been helped? The big car companies got bailouts, the big banks got bailouts, the big insurance companies got bailouts. The average guy working in Western Pennsylvania or rural Iowa did not. And so when the more you talk about the Exxon background and the portfolio, and he's a for-profit guy, I think the happier Donald Trump is going to be.
Get you out of here on this one, then. You mentioned perhaps, hey, let's relocate the idea of Washington to Midtown Manhattan. And while I know some business owners who might not agree with you as they try to traverse from east to west or thereabouts during the day, but there was a press conference scheduled for Thursday to address his business holdings. He tweeted that his sons, though, would be taking over, perhaps addressing that to a degree. As a businessman who ran on that, can you see him ever fully separating himself from his businesses, or is this just going to be something that we'll all decide to just look away from and not discuss?
He will never separate from his businesses enough to satisfy his harshest critics, because the fact is, every time America makes an action, foreign policy action, it affects so many places, and the Trump brand exists in so many places. You know what I mean? It's not like he owns like a restaurant and just say, well, walking away. There's going to be something out there. At the same time, the average American, based on polling I've seen, doesn't believe that Trump should have to abandon a lifetime of work and have it just go away. You know, having it go to his kids seems completely reasonable to most people. So I think there is a path forward if the average person can believe that the distance between Trump and his family's prosperity is sufficient. I don't know what sufficient is, if it's metric or English, I don't know how to measure it, but there is a zone there where he can get. And one of the things I think happened when he won this election, there was that period, you remember, Josh, like about 48, 72 hours where he was really quiet. I think it really hit him that he's the president. You know, there's a list and it's got Washington and Lincoln and Roosevelt and Reagan and now Trump. And so based on what I've seen so far, I believe he's going to put his place on that list ahead of the long list of Trump businesses and find some place near the sweet spot of sufficient distance.
There's an electorate that certainly hopes to agree with you, putting the creative director, Michael
That's my
Graham.
job.
As always, we appreciate the insights, my friend.
Thanks.